Sons of the Forest takes place years after the events of the first game. The protagonist is part of a search and rescue task force sent to a remote island to find missing billionaire Edward Puffton, along with his wife Barbara and daughter Virginia, who have all been missing for a little over 7 months. While attempting to land, his helicopter is shot down by a mysterious woman who proceeds to knock him out and leave him for dead at the site of the crash. After coming to consciousness, he wakes up to find just only one other survivor, Kelvin, and the two set out to find the other missing members of their squad. The island was owned by Puffcorps, Edward's company. Prior to that, it had been a destination for hikers and climbers, though not many adventurers ever returned to share their stories. The island was home to aggressive, cannibalistic factions that killed without indiscretion. Hunters and fishers that settled here to live off the grid had all been wiped out by their violent neighbors. But for the ones who managed to leave the island alive, they brought back with them stories about a bizarre, otherworldly metal that lined the walls of the massive cave system. Edward Puffton was an opportunist investor, and he foresaw potential in this new discovery, as did another company, the infamous Sahara Therapeutics, which we all know very well from the first game. The two companies entered a heated bidding war for ownership of the island, but Sahara was no match for the multi-billionaire. Puffcorps sent scientists to the island to investigate the mysterious metal, but instead, they found an even more valuable discovery. Deep beneath the island's sprawling cave system was a strange, alien cube, made of the same bizarre golden metal. Puffcorps researchers reached out to Sahara regarding their discovery, as Sahara had previously unearthed 2 alien artifacts themselves. They found out that the cube bore a striking similarity to the Sahara artifacts, as it appeared to be made of the same unusual metal. The Puffcorps researchers learned that entering the cube would cause a brief dimensional switch, but not without risks associated with it. Further research revealed that there were many recorded instances throughout history of this very cube appearing to people in their dreams. When these findings were delivered to Edward, he realized the magnitude of possibilities at his fingertips. Concerned that the discovery had been shared with Sahara, he prohibited any further communication with the company and enforced measures to ensure that everything regarding the cube was to be kept strictly confidential. Puffcorps then recruited Tim LeBlanc, the world's top specialist in multi-universal travel, to further investigate the cube and figure out how exactly it worked. After all, Tim had first-hand experience dealing with strange metallic artifacts. Of course, we all remember little Timmy LeBlanc from The Forest. In the events of the first game, Timmy was kidnapped and used as a human sacrifice inside the Sahara artifact in order to raise the deceased daughter of Matthew Cross, the main antagonist, back from the dead. Tim's exposure to the artifact as a child had left him haunted and cursed with mutations of his own, causing him to develop an obsession with multi-dimensional travel. He devoted his life to the study of parallel universes and became a world-renowned expert on the subject. Tim had been studying the island for years, being drawn to it for the possibility that it might be the key to defeating the demons inside his mind. Throwing himself into research, Tim discovered that the cube only activated every 8 lunar cycles, roughly every 9 months. And when this happened, the cube would open a window into another dimension. Edward saw this as the motherlode of business opportunities. He created a plan to recruit investors and wealthy clientele to experience cross-dimensional travel for themselves. He contracted a luxury design firm to quickly create a state-of-the-art, exclusive bunker facility called Hollow Springs, where wealthy celebrities and socialites could come to the island to stay and play as they waited to experience the cube and its promises of multiverse travel. Although the facility was largely unfinished and rushed in order to meet the deadline until the next cube activation, wealthy clients flocked to be among the first to reserve their room at Hollow Springs. The contractors worked around the clock to transform the island into an upper-class getaway, and even though Edward had taken precautions to keeping everything confidential, there was a mole in his ranks. Working undercover as a contracted employee, an agent from a competitor was stealing classified information about the cube and feeding it back to their company. Sahara Therapeutics was well aware of the nightmares caused by using the artifacts from their own twisted experiments. Given their shady dealings in the past, It's very likely that once they found out the potentials of the cube, they plotted to sabotage Hollow Springs from the inside out so they could swoop in and steal it. During the big celebration party on the evening of the 8th lunar cycle, the undercover employees snuck away to activate the cube and unleash hell. All life forms outside the vicinity of the cube were transformed into horrible creatures and mutations, many of them not even surviving the process. Edward himself died shortly after mutating, but his daughter Virginia escaped completely unharmed. In fact, Virginia hadn't even mutated because she had already experienced the artifact's effects long before. Edward was no stranger to Sahara Therapeutics. Edward had heard about Sahara's claims at resurrection and healing, and like many other wealthy parents of sick children, sent Virginia to Sahara when she was a child. But even though the artifact may have saved her life, it wasn't without consequence. Like Timmy, Virginia had survived the experiments of Sahara, but not without lasting side effects. Though timid at first, Virginia eventually begins to trust the protagonist and accompanied him and Kelvin on their search. As the nightmarish aftermath of the cube's activation continued to spiral out of control, the competitors' sleeper agents were sent in to infiltrate the bunker and recover everything that they could find about the cube. But the once human residents of Hollow Springs quickly proved to be much more deadly than anticipated. The deformed mutants destroyed the facility and killed any survivors along the way. They escaped into the cave system where they proceeded to kill all remaining PuffCore engineers, along with the competition's undercover operatives. Several months went by as the facility continued to fall further into ruin, and the mutants roamed the island alongside the cannibal populations. By the time the protagonist is sent on his recovery mission, there were only a couple more lunar cycles before the cube activated again. Traversing the island and fighting off varieties of mutants and cannibals along the way, the protagonist finally runs into another member of his task force, Tim LeBlanc. Tim and his father, Eric, the protagonist of the first game, are in combat with a gigantic mutant when the protagonist arrives to help. But they're ambushed and attacked by the same woman who shot down the helicopter in the opening scene. Eric LeBlanc was a well-known TV star and author, famous for his work on survivalism. PuffCore may have contracted him to engineer a way to terminate the island's cannibal populations, as Eric was very famously known to have survived the same ordeal years prior during the events of The Forest. As the protagonist awakens after the ordeal to an empty room, he sets out to regroup with Tim and Eric. The spiraling caves beneath Hollow Springs take him deeper underground, until the terrain starts to resemble something reminiscent of hell. Surviving the dangerous ordeal, the cave tunnels lined with alien metal lead him right to the cube, and waiting for him there is Tim, who has been counting down the milliseconds until the cube's next activation. In a frenzy to enter the cube before the countdown expires, they are joined by Kelvin and Virginia, and as the rogue agent rushes to enter, the door to the cube slams shut. As the cube begins dimensional travel, the many different facets of Tim that have been haunting him are each brought out and vanish one by one, finally bringing peace to his thoughts that have been tormenting him for years. In front of them appears a window into another universe, very likely the same universe in which the alien artifacts originated from. Their glimpse into the advanced civilization is brief, and when it ends, Tim appears to finally be in control of himself. The cube door quickly opens to reveal the miserable fate of the Silver Jacket agent that didn't make it. The group exits the cave to find Eric waiting for them with a helicopter, and rescuing his son once again, Eric, Tim, the protagonist, Kelvin, and Virginia all leave the island. Thanks so much for watching this story recap of Sons of the Forest. I will have a second video out in which we go over some of the clues and lore in detail. So if you have any questions that you want answered, leave them in the comment section and I will be sure to address them in the follow-up video. Thanks again for watching. Stay tuned for more Sons of the Forest updates. Subscribe if you would like to be kept in the loop, and I'll see you later.